Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big issues using the data behind the headlines. Today, we're tackling something huge, a deadline that could completely redefine the defense of an entire continent. So let's just jump right in with this bombshell report. Washington has sent a very clear message to its European allies. The clock is ticking. The U.S. expects them to start taking the lead in their own defense, a move that could shake the very foundations of Nato. And this is the year at the center of it all, 2027. This single number has sent absolute shockwaves across the Atlantic. This really challenges the whole security setup we've had since World War II, where the U.S. has always been the senior partner. And that's the real core of what we're digging into today. Is this deadline even remotely realistic? European officials are already on record saying no way. So the big question is, can Europe actually build a credible, independent defense in time, or is this whole thing just a collision course with reality? Okay, so to even figure out if this is possible, we've got to look at Europe's own ambitions for defense. This isn't a brand new idea. It's been floating around for decades, but the urgency, well, that's definitely new. You see, there's already a framework for this. It's called the Common Security and Defense Policy, or CSDP for short. For years, this has been the basis for the EU's missions abroad. But now, people are looking at it and wondering, could this be the foundation for defending the entire continent? But here's where it gets really interesting. You have to look at the fine print. The EU has its own mutual defense clause, right here, Article 42.7. But look at the language, an obligation of aid and assistance. Now, compare that to NATO's famous Article 5, which flat out says including the use of armed force. That little difference in wording, that is everything. It's been at the heart of this debate for years. And just look at these numbers. On paper, Europe's military might is, wow, it's staggering. When you add up the combined land forces of the EU countries, you're looking at a military that absolutely should be able to defend itself. But as we're about to see, what looks good on a spreadsheet doesn't always work on the battlefield. Of course, this whole scramble isn't happening in a vacuum. It's a direct response to a threat that has totally transformed since 2022. What's happened is that Russia has basically flipped a switch. Its entire economy is now on a war footing, built for industrial-scale warfare. This isn't just about Ukraine anymore. This is about getting ready for a long, high-intensity showdown. Their factories are running 24/7, just churning out equipment at a pace that Europe is really struggling to match right now. And to give you a real sense of what this means, let's just look at Lancet drones. As of early 2024, estimates showed Russia was pumping out about 120 of these things a month. And that's even after all the ones being used up on the battlefield. It just shows a capacity for mass production that's become a huge strategic problem for Europe. Now, you might look at this and think, okay, in the air, Europe's got this in the bag. By 2030, EU nations will have over 400 of the new F-35s, way more than Russia's projected fleet. But hold on, because numbers aren't the whole story. Russia has never been about matching its rivals one for one. They're playing a different game. As the Kiel Institute points out, Russia makes up for having fewer planes by building this massive, layered shield of air defense systems. And they use their sheer size, their strategic depth, to hide their most important assets deep inside their own territory, where they're much harder to hit. It's a classic asymmetric strategy. So, you've got this renewed threat on one side, this new American deadline on the other, and Europe is caught in the middle, in a frantic race to rearm. But, and this is a big but, turning all that money into an actual, effective military force is proving to be incredibly difficult. This chart of Germany's defense spending tells such a fascinating story. See that huge purple bar? That's a special 74 billion euro fund. A lot of that cash is going to foreign companies for big-ticket items. But now look at the lighter purple bars, the core, year-to-year defense budget. It's actually gone down. This points to a big reliance on one-off cash injections instead of a sustainable long-term plan. And the problems go way beyond just weird budget tricks. You order new equipment? Great. You might not actually see it for years. And Europe is still super reliant on the US for all the high-tech spy stuff, the eyes in the sky that you can't just buy off a shelf. Throw in major gaps in ammo supplies and factory bottlenecks, and that 2027 deadline starts to look less like a target and more like a five-alarm fire. And this quote right here, it just cuts right to the heart of it. It brings all those production problems back down to the brutal reality on the ground. The war in Ukraine has been a sobering lesson. Modern war is an industrial meat grinder. And if you don't have enough of the heavy metal, the tanks, the artillery, the human cost is just catastrophic. So what does this all mean? It means there's this massive, and I mean massive, gap between Europe's potential power and its actual real-world readiness. In fact, EU leaders have set their own, much more sober goal of being ready by 2030, and even that is considered incredibly ambitious by most analysts.
All of this, the US deadline, the Russian military machine, Europe's internal struggles, it all brings us here, to an alliance at a fundamental crossroads.
This pressure from Washington, whether it's a serious policy or just a negotiating tactic, is forcing a conversation that Europe has been putting off for decades. It's not really about success or failure anymore. This is a historic moment that's forcing Europe to finally decide what strategic autonomy actually means and whether it's willing to pay the price.
And that leaves us with the ultimate question, one that's going to shape global security for the rest of the century. Can Europe truly stand on its own 2 feet? The ambition is there, the resources are there on paper, but is the political will and the industrial power there to turn it all into a reality before the clock runs out? That remains to be seen.